The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the deserted playground. The swings creaked softly in the breeze, their chains swaying back and forth like ghostly fingers reaching for the sky. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped onto the faded asphalt, the once vibrant colors of the play equipment now faded and peeling. The air was heavy with the silence of neglect, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. The playground that had once echoed with laughter and shouts now seemed frozen in time, a relic of a past that had been forgotten. But as I wandered through the eerie stillness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I approached the swings, their movement seeming almost hypnotic in the fading light. With a hesitant hand, I pushed one of them, the rusty chains groaning in protest. The creaking seemed to carry on the wind, a haunting echo of the past. I glanced around, half expecting to see a group of children running and laughing, but the playground remained empty. As I moved further into the playground, the soft crunch of gravel beneath my shoes seemed to amplify the silence. The slides loomed like forgotten sentinels, their steps worn smooth by countless children who had once climbed them with carefree abandon. Now they stood like guardians of a realm that had fallen into disrepair. A flicker of movement caught my eye and I turned towards the sandbox. The sand shifted, as if stirred by an invisible hand. My heart raced as I watched, my breath caught in my throat. It couldn't be the wind, I thought, not in such a confined space. And then from the corner of the sandbox, a figure emerged. A child. Their clothing was tattered, their face obscured by shadows. I blinked, certain that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But as I stared, the figure moved closer, their footsteps making no sound on the ground. I took a step back, my heart pounding as the child continued to approach. They seemed to glide across the ground, their movements unnatural and eerie. My mind raced, torn between the urge to run and the compulsion to stay and confront whatever was before me. "Play with me," the child whispered, their voice like a distant memory carried on the wind. The words sent a shiver down my spine, and I stumbled back, my voice catching in my throat. I can't," I managed to stammer, my voice barely audible. The child's features remained hidden in the darkness, their eyes the only thing that seemed to gleam. And then, with a suddenness that made my heart jump, they disappeared, fading back into the shadows of the playground. The silence that followed was almost suffocating, broken only by the pounding of my heart. The air seemed charged with an energy I couldn't comprehend. The playground, once a place of innocence and laughter, had become a realm of unease and mystery. With each step I took towards the exit, the feeling of being watched intensified. The swings continued to sway, the chains creaking like a chorus of whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that the child was still there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting for someone to heed their haunting plea. As I walked away from the abandoned playground, I knew that the memory of that night would stay with me, a reminder that even the most familiar places can become tinged with an eerie presence, that the echoes of the past can linger in the air, and that sometimes the innocence of childhood can take on a sinister hue in the realm of the unknown. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of my small house as if begging for entry. The storm had trapped me inside, alone with the sound of rain drumming on the roof and the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the darkness. The solitude that usually comforted me now felt like a shroud of unease. I busied myself with mundane tasks, trying to drown out the ominous symphony of the storm. The creak of the floorboards beneath my feet and the flickering candlelight added to the eerie ambience. The world beyond my windows seemed to have vanished, leaving me in a cocoon of isolation. As the hours ticked by, the house seemed to grow quieter, the storm's fury somehow magnifying the silence within. The shadows danced on the walls, casting unfamiliar shapes that made me question my own senses. I tried to shake off the feeling that I was being watched, that hidden eyes followed my every move. A sudden power outage plunged the house into darkness, leaving only the feeble glow of the dying candle. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to navigate through the abyss. Every corner of the house now held a new fear, and I couldn't shake the dread that I was not alone. The storm outside continued its relentless assault, the rain like 1,000 tapping fingers on the windows. And then, amidst the cacophony, I heard it, a soft, distant whisper that seemed to ride on the wind. My heart stopped, my breath caught in my throat. I strained to listen, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. It was impossible to decipher the words, but the voice sounded so achingly familiar, as if it belonged to someone I had once known. Panic surged within me, and I called out into the darkness, my voice trembling. "Hello?" The echo of my own voice was all that replied, the silence pressing in around me like a suffocating weight. I hesitated, the primal instinct to flee battling against my own curiosity. With trembling hands, I retrieved a flashlight and ventured into the dimly lit hallway. The shadows seemed to have taken on a life of their own, twisting and shifting as if they were alive. My footsteps echoed like a heartbeat, each one a reminder of my vulnerability. And then, there it was again, a whisper, closer this time, as if it emanated from the very walls. As I moved cautiously through the house, the voice seemed to lead me, guiding me through the labyrinth of rooms. It was as if some invisible presence wanted me to follow, to unravel the mystery that had woven itself into the very fabric of my home. Despite the fear that gripped me, a strange compulsion pushed me forward. Finally, I found myself standing in front of a closed door, the door to the basement. The whispers were now urgent, a chorus of voices that seemed to be calling out to me, begging me to open the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned the doorknob, the door creaking open to reveal the yawning darkness below. With trembling steps, I descended into the abyss. The air was damp and cold, the light of my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. And then, as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw it, a flicker of movement in the corner, a shape that seemed to materialize from the shadows. My breath caught as the figure stepped forward, its features slowly coming into focus. It was me, a twisted reflection of myself, eyes hollow and voice distorted. The whispers were coming from this phantom, its words a distorted chorus of longing and despair. Terror consumed me as I realized that this entity was a manifestation of my own fears and loneliness. It had been born from the storm, from the isolation that had gripped me throughout the night. The echoes of solitude had given rise to something dark and insidious, a reflection of the darkest corners of my mind. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, as the entity reached out towards me. The storm outside raged on, its fury mirroring the turmoil within me. With a surge of courage, I turned and fled from the basement, slamming the door shut behind me. The whispers faded, replaced by the pounding of my heart and the heavy breathing that echoed in the confines of the house. The storm eventually subsided, leaving behind a silence that was both deafening and comforting. The house was once again empty, the phantom banished back into the shadows from which it had emerged. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, I realized that the true horror had not been the storm or the entity. It had been the darkness within me, the isolation that had allowed those fears to take hold. With a newfound understanding, I vowed to embrace the solitude rather than succumb to it, to confront my fears head-on instead of letting them consume me. The memory of that night would remain, a reminder of the power of the mind and the resilience of the human spirit. And as I stood in the quiet aftermath of the storm, I knew that the echoes of solitude could be transformed into echoes of strength, shaping the narrative of my own journey forward. The moon cast a silver glow on the waters below as I stood alone on the bridge. The sound of rushing water echoed in the silence, a soothing lullaby that seemed to beckon me into its embrace. The night was still, the air cool and crisp, and the bridge itself stood as a sentinel between two worlds, the familiar ground behind me and the unknown expanse ahead. As I leaned on the railing, staring out into the darkness, a feeling of isolation settled over me. The world seemed distant, separated by the chasm of water and the veil of night. It was as if I were suspended in a space between reality and imagination, a realm where the boundaries of time and place blurred. The bridge itself held an air of mystery, its arches and supports casting intricate shadows that danced on the water's surface. The moon's reflection shimmered like a pathway, inviting me to step beyond the confines of the bridge and into the realm of the unknown. But there was a hesitation, an unspoken fear that held me back. The wind whispered through the gaps in the railing, carrying with it a sense of solitude that wrapped around me like a cloak. In that moment, I was alone with my thoughts, my fears, and the weight of the world that seemed to press down on my shoulders. It was both liberating and suffocating, a dichotomy that I couldn't quite comprehend. As I gazed into the depths below, my mind began to wander. I thought of all the journeys that had been taken across this bridge, people crossing to new beginnings, to reunions, to farewells. Each step taken had left an imprint, a fragment of a story that was now intertwined with the very essence of the bridge. A shiver ran down my spine as I imagined the countless footsteps that had echoed across the wooden planks. The bridge had seen it all, the laughter of children, the whispered confessions of lovers, the hurried footsteps of those in a rush. And yet in this moment it was just me, standing at the crossroads of past and present. A gust of wind rattled the chains that lined the bridge, the sound like a distant chorus of voices. It was almost as if the bridge itself were trying to communicate, to share its secrets with the solitary traveler who had paused to listen. But what secrets did it hold? What stories had been woven into its very fibers? As I contemplated these questions, a feeling of calm washed over me. The bridge, with all its mysteries and histories, seemed to offer a form of companionship in my solitude. It was a witness to life's ebb and flow, a constant amidst the ever-changing tides. With a final glance into the depths below, I turned and began to walk back across the bridge. The moon continued to cast its ethereal light, and the sound of water remained a steady heartbeat. But now there was a new sense of purpose, a connection forged between myself and the bridge, a bridge that had reminded me that even in the midst of solitude, there was a thread of connection that bound us to the world around us. As I left the bridge behind, I carried with me the memory of that night, the feeling of being suspended between worlds, the whispers of the wind, and the reminder that even in moments of isolation, we are never truly alone. The bridge had been my silent companion, a listener to my thoughts and fears, and a testament to the power of human connection, even in the most solitary of places. The forest stretched out before me, an expanse of towering trees and tangled undergrowth that seemed to swallow all traces of civilization. I had ventured too far from the beaten path, driven by an insatiable curiosity to explore the depths of nature's secrets. But now, as the daylight waned and the shadows lengthened, I found myself disoriented and lost. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the gravity of my situation. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind, threatening to consume me. I tried to retrace my steps, but the dense foliage had a way of distorting familiar landmarks. The forest had become a labyrinth, and I was trapped within its embrace. My heart raced, the sound of my own breath echoing in the stillness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent my nerves into overdrive. I knew I was not alone. The sensation of being watched hung heavy in the air, like a shroud of darkness that clung to my every move. As I continued to stumble through the underbrush, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a figure obscured by the trees moving with an unnatural grace. My breath caught in my throat as I froze, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. And then, as if emerging from the very shadows themselves, the figure stepped into view. A man stood before me, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. In his hand, a knife glinted in the dappled sunlight, its blade catching the light in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. His features were obscured by a mask that seemed to mirror the twisted patterns of the forest around us. Fear surged within me, primal and all-consuming. I tried to back away, to retreat from the sinister presence that had materialized before me, but the forest seemed to close in around me, trapping me in a claustrophobic embrace. There was nowhere to run, no escape from the inevitability of our impending confrontation. The man with the knife didn't speak. He simply stared, his gaze unnerving and predatory. It was as if he could see into the depths of my soul, as if he knew the very thoughts that raced through my mind. I could feel his intent, his malevolent energy that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. My mind raced, searching for a way out, a plan of action. But reason seemed to desert me, leaving only a raw instinct for survival. I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing through the forest as I sprinted blindly, driven by a primal fear that transcended all rational thought. The man's laughter followed me, a chilling soundtrack to my desperate flight. It echoed through the trees, a haunting reminder that I was being pursued, that the forest was not my sanctuary but a hunting ground. The adrenaline in my veins pushed me onward, each breath a painful reminder of the danger that lurked just behind me. I stumbled and fell, the forest floor unforgiving as it met my body. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest, and forced myself to keep running. The trees seemed to blur together, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers to snag at my clothing. And then, with a burst of desperation, I burst into a small clearing. The moonlight bathed the space in an eerie glow, casting long shadows that danced on the ground. But there was no escape. The man with the knife was there, waiting, his mask a twisted mockery of a smile. I backed away, my chest heaving, my mind racing for a way out. The man advanced, his steps slow and deliberate. I knew that my fate was sealed, that the forest would become my final resting place. As the man raised the knife, the moonlight glinted off its blade, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But then, a rustling in the bushes behind the man caught his attention. He turned, his mask shifting as if registering surprise. And in that split second, I seized the opportunity. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and ran, the sound of my own footsteps drowning out the world around me. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I burst through the edge of the forest, the open expanse of the clearing before me a welcome sight. The night seemed to hold its breath, the forest malevolence unable to breach the boundary between shadow and light. As I stumbled out of the forest, I knew that I had escaped a fate that had seemed all but certain. The man with the knife remained trapped within the confines of the trees, his laughter now distant and fading. I collapsed to the ground, my heart still pounding, my breath ragged. The forest had been a place of danger and despair, a realm where the boundaries of reality had blurred and the darkness had taken on a life of its own. And as I stared back into the depths, I knew that the memory of that night would forever haunt me, a reminder that even in the most serene of landscapes, the shadows could hold unspeakable terrors.